Sue Jean stepped off the transport shuttle and into the massive docking bay of Kepler 7 Station. Her small bag felt heavy in her hands as she looked around at the other new cadets. They were all so different from her, tall insect-like creatures with shiny armor, beings made of crystal that sparkled in the light, and huge rock-skinned aliens that looked like walking mountains. She was the only human. "Look what we have here," said a voice behind her. Sue Jean turned to see one of the insect aliens pointing at her with one of his 4 arms. "They actually sent us a soft skin." The other cadets started laughing. The crystal beings made sounds like tinkling bells, while the rock creatures rumbled like distant thunder. Even the snake-like aliens with shiny scales were hissing in what sounded like amusement. "I am Sue Jean Kim," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I graduated first in my class from Earth Military Academy." "Earth Military Academy?" A crystal alien stepped closer, her voice sounding like breaking glass. "How cute. Did they teach you to fight with sticks and stones?" More laughter filled the docking bay. Sue Jean felt her cheeks burn red, but she kept her chin up. Her grandmother had always told her that when people make fun of you, it usually means they are afraid of something you have that they don't. A huge shadow fell over the group. Commander Thex walked into the bay, and even the loudest cadets went quiet. He was 7 feet tall with skin that looked like gray stone. Old scars covered his arms and face. His black eyes looked at each cadet, but when they landed on Sue Jean, she saw disappointment. "Cadets," his voice boomed like rocks falling down a mountain, "you will be divided into squads. When I call your name, step forward." One by one, the best cadets were called to join squads Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta. These were the elite groups where future leaders were trained. Sue Jean watched as the strongest, smartest, and most impressive cadets walked away with their new teammates. "Kim," Sue Jean, Commander Thex finally called. "Squad Epsilon." The remaining cadets snickered again. Everyone knew that Squad Epsilon was where they put the failures, the cadets who couldn't keep up with the real soldiers. It was also called the Reject Squad behind the instructors' backs. Sue Jean joined 3 other dejected-looking aliens. There was Jaiwoo, a thin insect alien whose family had thrown him out for being weak. Nari was a crystal being who refused to fight because she believed violence was wrong. The last member was Hyunwoo, a snake-like alien who seemed friendly but kept tripping over his own tail. "Well," Hyunwoo said cheerfully as they walked to their sleeping quarters, "at least we're all misfits together." Their room was smaller and older than the ones given to the elite squads. The walls had scratches and dents from years of use. Sue Jean chose the bed closest to the small window that looked out at the stars. That first night was terrible. Someone had mixed something awful into her food that made her sick for hours. When she finally felt better and went to check her training equipment, she found that her practice rifle had been broken and her uniform cut with something sharp. "Why are they doing this to me?" she whispered to herself in the dark. Nari's crystal body glowed softly in the darkness. "Because you scare them," she said quietly. "Scare them? But I'm just a human. I'm smaller and weaker than all of them." "That's exactly why." Jaiwoo added from his bed, "My family always said that the most dangerous enemies are the ones you underestimate." Sue Jean lay awake listening to the sounds from the other sleeping rooms. She could hear the elite cadets talking and laughing, making plans for tomorrow's training. Words like primitive, weak, and waste of space drifted through the thin walls. She thought about home, about Earth and her family, and her grandmother's garden where she used to sit and watch the birds. Her grandmother had raised her after her parents died in a transport accident. The old woman was small and quiet, but she was the strongest person Sue Jean had ever known. "Remember, little star," her grandmother used to say, "the brightest lights often come from the smallest sources. Don't let anyone convince you that being different makes you less. Sometimes it makes you exactly what the universe needs." Sue Jean closed her eyes and made a promise to herself. She would show them all that humans belonged here. She would prove that being small didn't mean being weak, and that being different could be a strength instead of a weakness. Outside her window, the training moon rotated slowly in space. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, and probably new ways for the other cadets to make her feel unwelcome. But she was ready. After all, Her grandmother had taught her that the hardest steel comes from the hottest fire, and Soo-Jin Kim was about to become very strong indeed. The other cadets had no idea what they had started by mocking the small human girl. They would learn soon enough that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the galaxy isn't the biggest predator. It's the one that no one sees coming. The next morning brought Soo-Jin's first real look at the Academy's training grounds. The entire moon had been turned into a giant testing facility with different environments everywhere she looked. There were hot deserts, frozen ice fields, thick jungles, and even areas that looked like the inside of spaceships. But far in the distance, behind tall energy walls that hummed with power, was a dark area that made all the instructors speak in whispers. The other cadets called it the Apex Sector, and even saying its name made veteran soldiers look nervous. "Today you begin combat training," announced Commander Thex to all the new cadets. Behind him, bright screens showed different training courses. Squads Alpha through Delta will take the Advanced Combat Simulation. Squad Epsilon will do the Basic Survival course. The elite cadets laughed again. Everyone knew that basic survival was what they gave to cadets who couldn't handle real fighting. It was like being sent to play with toys while the grown-ups did important work. Soo-Jin's first test was flying through a fake asteroid field using a jetpack. She watched the other members of her squad try first. Jaiwoo crashed into 3 space rocks before making it halfway through. Nari moved so slowly and carefully that it took her twice as long as it should have. Hyunwoo somehow got his jetpack stuck going backward and had to be rescued by robot drones. But when Soo-Jin strapped on her jetpack, she didn't rush forward like the others had. Instead, she watched. The asteroids weren't moving randomly. There was a pattern like a dance. She studied how they spun and drifted, looking for the spaces between them where she could glide without using much fuel. When she finally moved, she flowed to the asteroid field like water finding its way downhill. While her squad mates had fought against the course, she worked with it. "Interesting technique, human," said Sergeant Dak, their instructor. He was another rock-skinned alien, but smaller than Commander Thex. "But clever flying won't help you when the shooting starts." The shooting started right away. Combat training was designed for alien bodies, creatures with 4 arms, or crystal skin that could deflect energy blasts, or the ability to read minds. Soo-Jin had none of these advantages. She was slower than the insect aliens, weaker than the rock people, and couldn't do any of the mental tricks that the crystal beings used. In one horrible training session, she was killed 17 times in a robot computer. Each time, red lights would flash and a loud buzzer would tell everyone that Soo-Jin Kim was dead again. That evening, she sat alone in the eating area while her squad mates tried to cheer her up. She was picking at her food when she heard Commander Thex talking quietly to another instructor at a nearby table. "The human experiment is failing," he said in a low voice. "Maybe it's time to end this. I'll arrange their next exercise to take them near the Apex Sector boundary. A little scare should send them running home to their little planet." Soo-Jin's blood turned cold. She had heard the stories about the Apex Sector. Things lived there that had eaten entire groups of soldiers. Creatures so dangerous that the Academy's best warriors refused to go near them. If Commander Thex was planning to send Squad Epsilon there, it wasn't to train them, it was to get rid of them. She looked around the eating area, at all the other cadets. They were laughing and talking about their successful training sessions. None of them knew what she had just learned. None of them would care even if they did know. "What's wrong?" asked Nari, sliding her crystal body onto the bench across from Soo-Jin. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," Soo-Jin said quietly. That night, she lay in her small bed staring at the ceiling. Through the thin walls, she could still hear the elite cadets celebrating their victories. They had no idea how easy their lives were, how everything was designed to help them succeed, while everything seemed designed to make her fail. But as she listened to their voices, Soo-Jin remembered something her grandmother used to say. "When everyone expects you to fail, little star, that's when you have the best chance to surprise them." She sat up in bed and pulled out her personal tablet. If Commander Thex wanted to scare her with the Apex Sector, then she needed to learn everything she could about it. She spent the rest of the night reading old reports, studying security footage, and trying to understand what made these creatures so dangerous. What she found was strange. The creatures weren't just mindless killers. They were smart, maybe smarter than anyone realized. They worked together, they made plans, and they seemed to care about each other in ways that reminded her of animal families back on Earth. By morning, Sujin had an idea. It was crazy and probably wouldn't work, but it was better than just waiting to be eaten by whatever lived in the apex sector. She had 3 days before their next training exercise, 3 days to prepare for whatever Commander Thex had planned, 3 days to prove that being human wasn't a weakness. It was exactly what the galaxy needed, even if no one knew it yet. The other cadets might have the advantage in strength and speed and special abilities, but Sujin had something they didn't, the ability to see patterns where others saw chaos, and to find hope where others saw only danger. 3 days later, Squad Epsilon gathered their gear for what Commander Thex called a simple patrol exercise. Sujin packed her basic equipment, a scanner for checking damaged structures, emergency food bars, and a training weapon that she was pretty sure wouldn't work against anything truly dangerous. Remember, Commander Thex told them, his stone face showing fake concern, this is just an easy walk around Training Zone 7. Stay together, follow the marked paths, and come back by 6 o'clock tonight. But as their transport ship dropped them off, Sujin noticed they were much closer to the restricted areas than they should be. The energy walls that kept dangerous things locked away hummed loudly nearby, and she thought she saw dark shapes moving in the shadows beyond them. "Something feels wrong," whispered Nari, her crystal body making worried, chiming sounds. "The containment readings on my scanner are jumping around." Jaiwa's bug-like antennae twitched nervously. "My family's old military files mentioned this sector. Bad things happened here during the Big War." Even Hyunwoo seemed scared, which was unusual for him. "Maybe we'll see something exciting," he said, but his voice shook a little. They followed the patrol route for 2 hours before finding the first sign of real trouble. Massive claw marks had torn deep gouges in the barrier wall that was supposed to be stronger than spaceship armor. The metal looked like it had been opened like a food can buy something with incredible strength and very sharp claws. "That's impossible," Nari stammered, scanning the damage. "These barriers can stop direct hits from plasma cannons." Sujin looked at the claw marks more carefully. They weren't random scratches made by an angry animal. They showed purpose and planning. Whatever made these marks had been trying to get through the wall, not just attacking it in rage. They followed a trail of destruction that led deeper into the restricted zone. Broken containment units, smashed monitoring equipment, and more of those careful claw marks were everywhere. But the strangest thing was what Sujin didn't see. "Where are all the bodies?" she asked suddenly. Her squad mates stopped walking and looked around. Jaiwa's compound eyes moved in all directions. "You're right. All this destruction, but no remains anywhere. Not even burned marks from weapon fire. Maybe the creatures ate everything?" Hyunwoo suggested, not very helpfully. But Sujin was thinking about patterns again. The damage, the missing bodies, the smart way the destruction had been done. This wasn't the work of mindless monsters. This was something much more complicated. A deep rumbling sound echoed through containment zone, followed by what almost sounded like singing. Not the bell-like sounds that crystal beings made or the musical tones of snake people, but something deeper and older. "We should report this," Jaiwa said, reaching for his communicator. "Command needs to know that the containment has been broken." Static filled the air. Dead silence. Whatever was happening here was also blocking their communications with the outside. The singing grew louder and closer. Mixed with it came another sound, high-pitched cries that sounded upset and scared. Almost like baby animals. Sujin breathed. Those are the sounds of young creatures calling for help. Her squad mates stared at her. "How could you possibly know that?" Nari asked. Sujin didn't answer right away. She was listening not just with her ears, but with instincts that came from millions of years of human evolution. The same instincts that had helped her ancestors tell the difference between the growl of a hungry wolf and the whimper of a hurt puppy. "Because," she said finally, "I don't think these creatures escaped from their cages. I think they're trying to save their children." The idea hung in the air as the singing grew closer. Shadows began moving through the wreckage around them, and Sujin could feel eyes watching them from the darkness. "That's crazy," Jaiwu whispered. "These are apex predators. They're the most dangerous things in the galaxy. They don't have feelings or families or what?" Sujin interrupted gently. "Or the ability to love their children. Every living thing wants to protect its babies, Jaiwu. Even the scariest predators on Earth would die to save their young." A new sound joined the singing: footsteps. Big ones. Something large was moving toward them through the destroyed containment area. "Should we run?" Hyunwoo asked, his tail twitching with fear. "No," Sujin said quietly. "Running will only make them think we're threats. If I'm right about what's happening here, they don't want to hurt us. They just want help." "And if you're wrong?" Nari's crystal form was glowing brighter with stress. Sujin checked her scanner one more time, looking at the energy readings and structural damage reports. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. These creatures weren't random destroyers. They were parents in crisis. "If I'm wrong," she said, "then we were probably going to die anyway. Commander Thex didn't send us here to succeed. He sent us here to fail." The footsteps were getting closer. Soon they would come face to face with whatever lived in the apex sector. Sujin took a deep breath and tried to remember everything her grandmother had taught her about understanding animals. Sometimes the most dangerous-looking creatures were just scared and needed someone to listen. The creatures came out of the shadows like living nightmares. The smaller ones appeared first. Each one was as big as a ground car, with dark skin that seemed to eat up light. They moved like giant cats, smooth and deadly. But Sujin noticed something that made her heart beat faster with excitement instead of fear. They were moving in a protective circle around something. The adult creatures were surrounding several much smaller shapes that walked with the clumsy steps of babies learning to move. "Holy stars," Jaiwu whispered. "Those are shadow maws. Real shadow maws." These were the legendary monsters that had killed more soldiers than entire wars. Creatures so smart and fierce that the military standard rule was to run away and call for bombs from space. But as Squad Epsilon hid behind the broken pieces of a containment unit, Sujin watched how the creatures acted. The adults weren't randomly violent. They worked together with perfect coordination that showed deep intelligence and strong family bonds. "Look," she whispered, pointing carefully. "They're trying to reach something." The adult shadow maws were focused on a partly collapsed containment building. Inside, barely visible through the rubble, were more of the baby creatures. Trapped, their scared cries echoed through the chamber, and the adults outside answered with increasingly worried calls. The containment system must have broken during the breach. Nari observed quietly. The babies are stuck inside, and the adults can't get to them without making the building collapse completely. Hyunwoo reached for his training weapon with shaking hands. "So what do we do? Fight them? Run away? Call for help?" He paused. "Oh, right, we can't call for help." "No," Sujin said quietly. "We help them." 3 alien faces turned to stare at her in complete shock. "Help them?" Jaiwu's voice cracked. "Sujin, those are apex predators. They've killed more soldiers than the entire Dominion War. They don't need help. They need to be destroyed before they kill everything." But Sujin was already standing up slowly and carefully. She remembered her grandmother's stories about the old days on Earth, when humans first learned to work with wolves, not by fighting them or scaring them, but by understanding them and earning their respect. The nearest adult shadow maw turned toward her, and for the first time, Sujin saw it clearly. It was 3 meters tall, built like a huge earth cat mixed with something reptilian. Its skin wasn't really black. It was a deep blue-green color that shifted like oil on water. Most amazing were its eyes, large, intelligent, filled with what she recognized as the desperate worry of a parent. "Easy," she said softly, using the same gentle tone her grandfather had used with frightened horses. "I understand. Your children are trapped." The creature tilted its massive head, studying her carefully. The other adults had noticed her now, but they weren't attacking. They were listening. Sujin slowly reached into her pack and pulled out her engineering scanner, the tool she used to check if damaged structures were safe. She held it up where the shadow maw could see it, then pointed toward the collapsed building. "I can help," she said clearly. I can help free them safely. What happened next would be talked about throughout the galaxy for generations. The huge Shadow Maw, clearly the leader of the group, walked closer to Sujin. Her squad mates gasped in terror, but she didn't move. When the creature was close enough that she could feel its warm breath on her face, it did something that had never happened before in recorded history. It lowered its head in a bow. The gesture was unmistakable. Recognition, acceptance, trust. By all the stars, Nari whispered, it's submitting to her. Working together, Sujin and the Shadow Maws carefully took apart the debris that was trapping the babies. Her knowledge of engineering combined with their incredible strength and precise understanding of the building's structure. The creatures seemed to know exactly which pieces they could move without causing more collapse. It took hours of careful work. Sujin would scan each piece of rubble to make sure removing it was safe, then point to show the adults where to grab it. They followed her directions perfectly, moving with surprising gentleness for such powerful beings. When the last piece of wreckage was cleared away and the baby creatures were reunited with their parents, the Alpha Shadow Maw approached Sujin one final time. It rested its enormous head against her shoulder for just a moment, a gesture of gratitude that needed no translation. The babies chirped happily as they nuzzled against their parents. The adults sang their deep, beautiful songs of relief and joy. For a few perfect minutes, Sujin stood in the middle of a family reunion between the most feared predators in the galaxy. Then the pack melted back into the shadows as quietly as they had appeared, leaving Squad Epsilon alone with a story that would change everything. Did that really just happen? Hyunwoo asked in a dazed voice. Nobody's going to believe this, Jaiwoo added. But as rescue ships appeared in the sky above them, drawn by the sudden silence where there should have been screams and explosions, Sujin knew that the evidence would speak for itself. The freed babies, the carefully dismantled debris, the complete lack of casualties, it all told a story that the military would have to accept. She had just proven that even the galaxy's most dangerous predators could become allies when approached with understanding instead of fear. Commander Thex's stone face had never looked more serious as he studied the reports on his desk. Around the meeting room table sat the Academy's most important leaders, along with Sujin and her squad mates. Bright holographic displays showed scans of the damaged buildings, timeline records, and evidence from the automated security systems. All of it proved impossible. A human cadet had made peaceful contact with apex predators and solved a dangerous crisis without anyone getting hurt. Explain to me, Commander Thex said slowly, how a first-year cadet did something that our best military units have never managed to do. Sujin stood straight and tall. Sir, I watched how the creatures acted and realized they were trying to protect their babies. Instead of seeing them as mindless monsters, I understood they were intelligent beings dealing with a family emergency. Admiral Kex, an old crystal alien whose body had become cloudy with age, leaned forward. Are you saying we've been handling these creatures wrong for hundreds of years? With respect, Admiral, I think we've been handling many situations wrong. Sujin paused, then continued. Human military training teaches us to understand why enemies do what they do, not just how dangerous they are. These weren't enemies. They were scared parents. The room became completely quiet. Finally, Dr. Yammer, the Academy's expert on alien life forms, spoke up. If this is true, if apex predators can be talked to and reasoned with, it changes everything, Commander Thex finished quietly. Over the next few weeks, Sujin found herself at the center of changes that spread throughout the entire galactic military. She was moved from Squad Epsilon to a brand new program, the Xenobiological Diplomatic Corps. Instead of learning to destroy dangerous alien creatures, she learned to communicate with them. Her first real mission brought her back to the Academy's moon, but this time as a graduated specialist. The Shadow Maw family had been moved to a proper nature preserve, but they remembered her. When she walked up to their enclosure, the big alpha ran over like a giant, terrifying pet greeting its favorite person. I still can't believe that thing almost ate us, Hyunwoo said with a nervous laugh. He, Nari, and Jaiwoo had all asked to join the XDC program after seeing what Sujin could do. It was never going to eat us, Sujin replied, scratching behind the alpha's ear, a spot she learned it really enjoyed. It was just worried about its children. Any parent would have acted the same way. Admiral Kex approached the group, her crystal body making happy chiming sounds. Specialist Kim, I have your next assignment. She handed Sujin a data tablet, showing a star system far away on the galaxy's edge. Our scout ships have found something amazing, a space creature as big as a small moon. Ships that get close to it disappear, but there's no sign that it attacks them. The fleet wants to destroy it before it becomes a bigger threat. Sujin studied the information, looking at the patterns of missing ships, the creature's movement through space, and when the encounters happened. They want me to try talking to it first. The military is learning. Slowly, Admiral Kex confirmed. Your methods have saved many lives and prevented costly wars. But this mission will be dangerous. This creature is unlike anything we've ever seen before. As Sujin looked at the data, she felt the familiar excitement of a puzzle waiting to be solved. Somewhere in these patterns was a truth waiting to be discovered, an understanding that could help different species get along better. When do I leave? She asked. Commander Thex, who had been silent during their conversation, finally spoke. Specialist Kim, when you first arrived here, I thought accepting you was a mistake. I believe humans were too primitive and too weak to help with galactic defense. He paused, his black eyes meeting hers directly. I was completely wrong. Your species brings something we have forgotten, the wisdom to see enemies as living beings, and to treat conflicts as problems to be solved rather than wars to be won. The galaxy is safer because of people like you. Later that evening, alone in her new quarters preparing for the space mission, Sujin recorded a video message to send back to Earth. Grandmother, she said, smiling at the camera, you were right about strength. It's not about being the biggest or the strongest. It's about understanding things that others can't see. Today, the galaxy learned that lesson. Tomorrow, maybe we'll teach them something new. Outside her window, the stars stretched endlessly in all directions, infinite possibilities, countless worlds, and somewhere among them, mysteries waiting for someone brave enough to approach with open hands instead of weapons. The human recruit they had mocked had become something the galaxy had never seen before. Not a conqueror of space, but its translator, helping different forms of life understand each other across the vast darkness between the stars. The other cadets who had laughed at her small size and soft skin now studied her methods in their classes. The commanders who had dismissed her as primitive now asked for her advice on peaceful solutions to conflicts. And somewhere in the deep of space, a moon-sized creature waited for the first person in galactic history who would approach it not as a threat to be destroyed, but as a being to be understood. Sujin Kim was ready for whatever came next.